A manifesto on financial inequality. My fellow Americans, there has been an issue that has plagued our country since the Reagan administration. Financial inequality has caused a major divide in this country and tensions between citizens among the classes. Now, more than ever, citizens must unite in order to solve a bigger problem that needs to be fixed. Outlined in this manifesto are the tactics that we must demand as citizens for our legislators to implement. Section 1. Increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour for entry-level jobs. Highly detested by the upper middle class and working class, a $15 an hour minimum wage would give entry-level workers the resources to afford basic necessities, such as food, water, clothing, shelter, and health care. The current federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour has not changed in the past decade. No person, not even me, can survive on $7.25 an hour. To alleviate concerns about a $15 an hour minimum wage, I want those who are skilled workers, work in the uniformed services, tradesmen, and other jobs requiring degrees, certification/licensing, or other credentials to understand that they will be making slightly more than what they are currently making. Their increased wages are based on their education, chosen trade, and risk involved in the daily execution of their jobs. This is a major change that needs to take place as Americans, including myself, are living paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet, leaving us with only a few dollars to secure the basic necessities, including a week's worth of groceries that have to be stretched out for a period of 2 weeks before we can afford to go out and shop for our groceries again. My question to the major corporations is, how can you afford a multi-million-dollar house, a luxury car, top-of-the-line clothing and accessories, and can't afford to pay your employees a decent wage? Are your expensive tastes more important than me being able to keep a shirt on my back, food on the table, and a roof over my head? I mean, my coworkers and I are the reason you can afford your expensive lifestyle. Not only is a livable wage a problem for regular people, but in this country, it is perfectly legal for a company to pay an employee with a physical, intellectual, developmental, or emotional disability less than federal minimum wage. As a person with a mild, high-functioning intellectual disability, I find this disgusting, cruel, and inhumane. I personally have had to jump over hurdles and climb mountains for my rights as an individual with a disability. I should not have to fight for the right to earn minimum wage. Luckily enough, I have never had to fight for my right to earn equal pay, but others haven't been so lucky. We are more than capable of funding a $15 an hour minimum wage. Funding cuts will have to be made, owners of major corporations will have to take salary cuts, and the federal government will have to make drastic changes, some of which are outlined in this manifesto. Section 2. Transition from salary to stipend compensation for senators and representatives. In order to fund a $15 an hour minimum wage, senators and representatives must accept the transition from receiving salary-based compensation to stipend-based compensation. This will force our senators and representatives in Congress to find a job to contribute to the workforce. This model follows the state of Texas, where lawmakers and the governor do not get paid a biweekly paycheck or have a career in politics. Most, if not all, lawmakers in Texas hold a regular job like the rest of us, because they only receive a nominal quarterly stipend. As an American over 18, I am able to choose my senators and representatives at the polls. I choose them based on their track record, but lately I think that all of the senators and representatives in Congress are not focused on passing bills, but focused on their paychecks, paid by myself and 300 million other tax-paying citizens. I feel that the men and women in Congress should be less focused on the money and more on the citizens they represent. Should we successfully get Congress to transition to stipends, they will be able to understand the difficulty of living paycheck to paycheck, and hopefully give them a rude awakening and a reality check. Section 3. Making price gouging illegal in all industries. The main cause of inflation is price gouging across all industries. Price gouging only benefits the corporations and the manufacturers whose greed has gone unchecked for decades. Price gouging affects not only the poor, but all people in every social class in the United States. Price gouging has cost citizens who would otherwise live a long and healthy life their lives. Thousands of Americans have died at the hands of corporate greed because they simply cannot afford their medications. Of those who have died, a majority of them are diabetics. Insulin costs have risen over 300% in the past decade. This has forced insulin-dependent diabetics having to ration their insulin to make sure they have enough insulin to last them the month. Those who are forced to ration their insulin by underdosing put themselves at risk for complications that can easily be prevented with affordable access to insulin. Some have even gone to extreme lengths, including crossing the border into Canada and Mexico to purchase their insulin, where it is cheaper to get a 90-day supply than a 30-day supply in the United States. Being that I have been affected by the pharmaceutical price gouging with the EpiPen crisis, which is why I no longer carry one, putting myself at risk of dying every time I get stung by an insect. This is a risk that I shouldn't have to take, and neither should those who rely on an EpiPen as an emergency medication to treat an episode of anaphylaxis. I wonder if the pharmaceutical industry actually cares about the patients, or do they just care about the profits? Because if they truly did care about their patients, they would make their products affordable for everyone, and not just the ones with insurance or can afford to pay out of pocket for their meds. Not only does price gouging affect our healthcare industry, but also everyday products including produce and food. Food prices have gone up because of corporations and their uncontrolled greed, paying farmers pennies on the dollar for their crops, only to have their profits eaten by operating costs and utility companies increasing the rates that make it difficult to keep the lights, water, and gas on. The lack of American workers willing to work the fields has left farmers having to resort to using willing, undocumented migrant workers to work the fields, leaving farmers vulnerable to legal issues and loss of their staff. Price gouging isn't an issue we can dust under the rug. We must make it illegal for corporations to increase the prices of any product to outrageous levels. Section 4. Repealing unnecessary taxes. Unfortunately, the only guarantees in life are debt, taxes, paperwork, and death in this country. Because of fiscal irresponsibility of past administrations, states have been forced to create unnecessary and excessive taxes. Connecticut is the greatest example of excessive taxation. On top of the federal excise tax on petroleum-based fuels, gasoline and diesel, Connecticut has added an additional tax on petroleum-based fuels known as the mileage tax. Other taxes that have been implemented include the hospital tax and the single-use bag tax, which has been suspended until further notice due to COVID-19. Among other proposed taxes that I can't remember off the top of my head. These taxes, despite creating revenue, have put an additional burden on the residents of Connecticut, myself included, which some of us cannot afford. Section 5. Regulating televangelists and megachurches. Another thing that has gone unregulated for decades are televangelists and pastors of megachurches. As a practicing Catholic, I find the lavish lifestyle of televangelists and pastors of megachurches disgusting. They prey on the weak and vulnerable by brainwashing them into paying disgustingly high tithes and sacrificial offerings. The current tax code allows these blasphemous, predatory, and satanic heathens to profit off the weak and vulnerable to support their extravagant lifestyles in order to spread the word of the gospel without being required to pay or file taxes under the guise of religious liberty and claiming nonprofit status with the IRS. Being that I am Catholic, I was taught that greed is a deadly sin. I watch these pastors give their sermons begging for their followers to give X amount of dollars for X, Y, and Z. And I think to myself, is this what the spirit of charity is? In my book, I see it as obtaining money under false pretenses. As a Catholic, our priests are highly regulated by the archdiocese at the local level and the Holy See in Rome. It is my belief that these individuals must be regulated as many followers have drained their life savings in the name of their false prophecy. As Americans, we must demand that the IRS subject televangelists and pastors of megachurches to log and submit their annual income, expenses, and losses to the IRS and undergo annual audits and annual deposition hearings conducted by the IRS. Section 6. Elimination of sales taxes on essential items. In 44 states, consumers are required to pay sales tax on most, if not all, products in stores, including essential items. Sales tax also drives up the cost of the items, making it difficult for low-income families to afford the basic necessities. The basic necessities that should not be subject to sales tax are baby formula and solid food, diapers and training pants. This also includes adult diapers and incontinence supplies, baby wipes, basic clothing and undergarments, all ages and genders, includes footwear and socks, feminine hygiene products, toiletries, grocery items, produce, durable medical equipment, and disposable medical equipment. Because some of these items are already expensive, sales tax makes it difficult for those who are low income to afford these items. This has led to people going without food, clothing, and sometimes being forced to shoplift certain items, especially adults who have children in an age where if one thing is off, child abuse and neglect are suspected, and an investigation is launched. Not only does sales tax lead to child abuse and neglect investigations, it has also put the health of women and the health and safety of women in jeopardy. The average box of feminine hygiene products can cost anywhere from $15 to $25 per package. With sales tax, it can be anywhere from $18 to $30. This has led some women to using their hygiene products for longer than recommended. This action puts any woman at risk for toxic shock syndrome, which, if left untreated and not immediately recognized, is fatal. Every woman should be able to afford their hygiene products and not put their health at risk. When it comes to clothing, it pays to be thin. And as a larger person, I pay 2 to 3 times more than the normal-sized person for new clothing. I'm sorry, but I did not give you permission to charge me extra for having a larger frame. When it comes to infant care items, diapers, wipes, formula, and solid baby food, it seems we have forgotten that not all mothers have a steady source of income or paid maternity leave. Some are single mothers and the sole breadwinners of the household, and after rent, insurance, and the bills are paid, there's not much left to purchase diapers, wipes, and formula. Some women are lucky enough to have friends and family members help them acquire said supplies. Others aren't so lucky. We have forgotten that infants, although precious and cute, are a handful to take care of. Removing the sales tax on not only infant care items, but all items mentioned, would lower the cost of living and lift a small burden off the consumer. The call to action. We, as Americans, will not survive if the cost of living continues to increase. If we do not change our current financial state, millions of Americans will end up hungry, homeless, and will lose access to things that we take for granted. All because people cannot seem to get a grip on reality. I ask that you write to your senators, representatives, and other elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels. Rally at your state capital when it is declared it's safe to do so. Write an open letter or make a video and post it on social media. There is strength in numbers, and we must openly voice our opinions and let them be heard, as we are guaranteed the right to free speech as citizens of this country. We must not let the elite dictate to us how much we are paid, what products we buy, the food we eat, what cars we're allowed to drive, so on and so forth. We must peacefully assemble and ask for financial equality. If we don't, we will fail not only ourselves, but future generations. I thank you for listening. Please make it a great day and stay safe.